Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Big Jiu Jitsu Show. I'm Rob,
I'm Randy.
and it's another episode. It's consistency. I think consistency is the key to training. The consistency is the key to podcasting, and the streak's alive. Let's keep it going. But before we talk about it, I want to introduce. We have a special guest on the podcast today, Mr. Rob Cole, Jiu Jitsu black belt instructor, and he's come on the show today just to talk about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, his background, and things of that nature. So, Rob, thanks for coming on the show today.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Of course. Before we get started, could you kind of just give a background of how you got started in martial arts and how you got into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu?
Well, martial arts, I've probably been involved in martial arts close to 40 years now. Growing up as a kid, watching Bruce Lee, all the movies, always loved martial arts, always loved that stuff, practicing kicks, doing all that stuff, and always wanted to train, out of school, but, I was into sports, in our neighborhood, baseball, football, basketball, wiffle ball, street hockey, whatever. And then I think I rented. Then I went to Tommy K's video VHS, dating myself here. And I think I rented Bloodsport and Kickboxer, early Jean-Claude Van Damme movies. I rented them both at the same time. And I remember watching them, and he's doing all the splits and the kicks and all this stuff. And I'm like, okay, this is the motivation I need. I really like this stuff. I just want to throw kicks and do splits. I was always a little flexible. So I just started practicing splits in my room. I, got myself down to a full split before I got my parents to sign me up to go to karate. There was a local school. So I just started doing splits in my room and kicks, and I just signed up for karate at about, 12 or 13 years old. And I really got into that, and I just wanted to be Van Damme. So I didn't even want to throw punches or anything, just throw kicks. And then I progressed through that, started training a lot. Did some competitions, did some kata and all that stuff. And then it just started evolving more. And then it was 1993, and I seen the first UFC, and I'm watching that, and I was seeing Hoist dominate everybody and just all the different styles. And I'm like, okay, I need to learn how to grapple. And this is 1993, and I'm in Connecticut, and there really wasn't that available. I think there was Henzo might have been in New York at the time, but most of them were on the West Coast, and there wasn't even a jujitsu or grappling school in Connecticut. So then like I said, I always liked Bruce Lee. So I was studying the Jeet Kune Do concepts. You get his books and stuff like that. And there was actually a Jeet Kune Do concept school not too far away. And so it was more about live training and real fighting, because I figured, karate, taekwondo, that stuff is good. But then I was seeing what was kind of working in the octagon, early days, no biting, no eye gouging, that's it. So it was like, this is real fighting, and Jeet Kune Do concepts was kind of like that Bruce Lee style live training. You got to get hit and all that. So I joined Jeet Kune Do concepts, did a lot of stuff there, and then we just had mats. So we would mess around with grappling. I think I bought Henzo Gracie and Craig Kukuk tapes, VHS tapes, and we bought some stuff from like Panther Production videos, those old school, in the back of the Black Belt magazine. And we just started trying out the stuff and just learning it on our own. And I think a blue belt came through one time from New York, and he just mopped us all up like nothing. And we're like, this is amazing. So then just things happened, and me and my wife/girlfriend at the time, we just moved out to California for my job when I was younger. And then I found a jiu-jitsu skill, but then also Frank Shamrock, who just won the UFC title, was training at AKA, American Kickboxing Academy, in San Jose. This is when he was just winning it or about to win it. And I decided to join up there. And then that's because I was really into MMA and all that training. And I wanted to get better at, fighting, actual fighting like that. So I just started training with Frank Shamrock at AKA while I was doing a little jiu-jitsu on the side at another school. And then I went full into like MMA type training. I was still working full time and trying to train full time. And then that's how I got involved in grappling. And that was, 96, 97. So, and then since then, I've been full like on grappling was my main focus. Did some MMA for a little bit, and then it became more grappling. Then I moved cross country a couple times. Finally decided to get into the gi, jiu-jitsu that way. So I always came from like a submission grappling, leg locking background. And then I just kind of wanted to learn all the phases, all the different ways to grapple. And then I've been doing that for, 20 something years now of grappling. So that's kind of my long, brief introduction of how I got into this stuff.
I mean, that's, even though you say it's brief, it's still a pretty entertaining one because it's rare. I feel nowadays to meet anybody or talk to somebody who's um, really got to see the inception of the UFC, got to see it on TV. Because the only time I even briefly remembered it as a kid because it was like my parents loved Inside Edition. I don't know why. It was like one of those,
Yeah.
like it's just a terrible TV show. For the younger kids, it's basically just like tabloids on TV. That's
Oh
really
yeah,
what
I
it is.
remember that. Yeah, I remember that
Yeah.
show. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And they're talking about like the human cockfighting. That is ultimate fighting. I remember watching it. I was a kid. I'm like, that looks fucking awesome, actually. But there
Well,
was
yeah, when I seen
nothing like
it, I seen it in 1993, and I seen the first one live, well, live on pay-per-view, and I'm watching it, and it was just so low budget. There's people thrown in, and it's like they didn't even they didn't even have rounds yet or time limit because they didn't think any of that needed it at the time because it was just people in there fighting and somebody's going to drop, when there's no rules like that. And then, UFC 2, 3, you see Ken Shamrock coming in. He started developing his ways after losing in the first thing. And then you're watching it, and then they're like, this is insane. So then they got it taken off air. I think Senator John McCain, he was working with the boxing commission. He got that taken off air. And then they started doing in the Native American reservations. And then it finally got back. I seen the whole inception of everything, like of all the martial art from what worked and what didn't. And it was really cool to see all that. Like I used to have all of them on VHS tapes at the time, and I just was obsessed with just different way martial, not like the fighting of let's beat somebody down and can you win, but just the way to fight, what works, what doesn't, and just like that testing over and over, and you see it just kind of develop until what the modern fighting became. And then like Frank Shamrock was one of the considered first modern day complete fighters. You had Marco Huas who was doing a little bit of it, a couple others, but Frank was like kind of the point of like, okay, we're throwing in all the wrestling, the fighting, the kickboxing. He was cross training with Maurice Smith, cross training with TK, who was a jiu-jitsu grappler from Japan. Um, and you've seen all these different, and he's actually put into constraints and conditioning, which fighters didn't really do back then. Either just beat each other up, trained hard, or do some swimming. And he started adding in all the different zone trainings, and you just seen it kind of modernize. And it's really cool to see that whole evolution happen.
So, and it's funny because I feel like so me and Rob Cole talk on the Discord, and I feel like almost every time he posts on there, it's something that I either needed to hear or already believed. I feel like we parallel each other in a lot of ways. So selfishly, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to get him on the show. But so Bloodsport, comparing that, which I'm a huge Bloodsport fan as well, and I trained in Wing Chun and Jeet Kune Do when I was younger, and then made the transition into boxing and got into mixed martial arts and all the same stuff. So we mirror each other in a lot of ways, in a lot of respects with the backgrounds. But it's interesting because you watch something like Bloodsport, you got the Kumite going on, mixed styles of martial arts represented to see who's the best. And then that's what ultimately the UFC kind of set out to do as well. Um, what do you think it is? Because obviously you and I have both made that transition. Rob has also made that transition from traditional martial arts to grappling and MMA and has competed in MMA. So we're all kind of on the same page about this. What do you think it is that um, in on one hand inspires people to recognize, okay, this works or doesn't work, and I need to be open-minded enough to recognize that and adapt my training accordingly, versus what prevents people from doing that? Because I think this will kind of segue as well into some of your teaching methods.
I think, and at some level, it comes down to ego, if you're, or just that like sunk cost fallacy of like you've been doing something for so long, like a traditional approach in this, and then you're like, everything just gets turned upside down. You're like, okay, you got this amazing karate, kung fu person stepping into the cage, and they think this stuff is just the greatest thing ever. And then somebody like Tank Abbott just destroys you. And he had some wrestling in high school and a little boxing, and he was just tough. And you're like, something's not right here. So you either go two ways. There's like that point where you're like, okay, I'm going to stick to what I did, not accept this new truth, this new reality. And I'm going to dig in deeper on that. And I'm just going to say, all right, that's just kind of, you know, it's not real fighting because you can't do everything you want to do. And my techniques are very deadly. And you just stick to your approach, which is fine if you want. The martial art still has value. Like I appreciate my karate, taekwondo days for like my flexibility, some speed, just doing different movement patterns and ranges of motion, which is great. But you see the reality side and you go, okay, this doesn't make sense. So you have to kind of make that pick. You're going to go, okay, I'm going to stick to what I did and I put all these years on it, or am I going to step outside the box, take an ego hit, try to learn something new, and try to accept this new reality and just adapt, because that's all we're ever doing anyway. That's since the beginning, whatever. We're always just adapting to what's available. So there's like that point where you're like, whoa, okay, I can dig in, stay traditional, or I can accept it. And I feel like one of the best things I've done in this 40-year journey of martial arts is I've always kept seeing what was kind of new things, what we're going to kind of experiment, dabble, Bruce Lee style, reject what is useless, add what is specifically your own, all his philosophies. So I think it really goes along with that way, if you've probably seen the same on that end with the traditional compared to the more modern stuff.
Yeah, I did. Like, I really like was excited when you said the sunk cost fallacy because I've used it so many times. Like one in particularly because of my jujitsu. Like, if you're broken, why haven't you quit? It's like because I put too much money into this. Like I can't
Yeah.
quit. But it's the same thing. So like Randy said, we've all come from a traditional background and stuff. And something I find interesting is the fact that I thought martial arts inherently teaches things of like humility or respect, understanding, love of learning, all that stuff. But like I feel like some of the styles like you're talking about don't do that because it's the ultimate killing art that will the rules. I can't use everything in my magic martial arts moves because it'll kill you, as opposed to like you just punch me in the face and knock me out and I can't use my magic moves. It's I don't know if it's delusion or like you said, just how could I be wrong for training so many years? But
Well,
that's
well,
never.
yeah. What happens? Yeah, because what happens in any of these styles, if you stick to say Taekwondo, Wing Chun, Tai Chi, any of these styles, who are they training against all the time? The people that do their same style. So it works against the other person. It counters this and that. That's what they're doing. So you get a Taekwondo person of, you know, 20 years against another Taekwondo person. They're going to use Taekwondo looking things. But now you throw them against a high school wrestler who's not standing there in front of them in the same stance, and everything goes out the window and they just shoot a double leg and they get blasted. Like the original Gracie challenges, I used to watch those tapes. They've been doing this challenging people since the early days, and I had the Gracie in action tapes. And then you see Jorge and Gracie and all these guys fighting, in a little gym, and the karate guy standing there, he's hopping around, ready to go, and Jorge comes in with the worst stance ever, and he throws a front kick that they don't fight against, or their hands are up, and he just rushes them and tackles them. It's like, okay, because you're not going against a taekwondo, you have no adaptability. If you want to be a true martial artist, if you want to be able to, you need to fight in all the ranges, and that's what MMA kind of created. We have to fight in all the ranges, and then it goes against all the movies we've seen growing up our whole life, and we still see it in movies now. And you see ridiculous things, and you should just see it as a movie. But people look at that and they go, "Oh, yeah, that person's amazing." But when you throw somebody in the cage or a fight or whatever, you have to be adaptable. That's the only way this martial art, which is a physical thing, can be proven. That's it. It has to be done in that way. It can't have all these rules to where like we talk about with the constraint-led approach and all this, the rules dictate what the sport is. So less rules, you need to be more adaptable. Super strict rules, like, you hear boxers say all the time, oh, MMA striking is sloppy. Yes, of course it's sloppy compared to boxing, where you can't throw a kick, you can't throw a knee, you can't throw an elbow, you can't do any of that. You have gloves on. So that style of boxing was created by the rules of the sport. And the more efficient, better forms of boxing emerge because of that rule set. Now you throw in kickboxing. Now you have to defend a kick. The stance is going to change. It's going to have to. So then you take something like MMA, where there's barely any rules, especially in the beginning. Yes, of course, it's going to look sloppy because that's the nature of fighting. That's the nature of anything. So it's going to get less rules. It's going to look a little sloppier in air quotes. And then as we make smaller rules, things get a little tighter and then it looks more technical. So you're just kind of seeing that adaptation all over the place.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, you definitely see that stuff a lot. And it's funny because some of the things you're saying I've said a million times when people ask me to explain why certain things are the way they are. So the classic example, striking MMA, for the longest time you'd hear Muay Thai fighters or kickboxers in the K1 type format or professional boxers, and they would say the same stuff. And I'm like, well, the level of the hands, the positioning of the hands is going to change because they got to worry about takedowns too. They've got to be able to defend against those, and that's going to shift where they tend to keep their hands. They're also wearing smaller gloves, so there's less surface area of the head and face covered by the gloves when they have a higher guard. I mean, there's just so many things in the environment that influence how you hold your hands, how you stagger your stance. I mean, you even look at boxers like Western boxing and Muay Thai. In Muay Thai, the stance is more squared because it favors the rule set or what's allowed or not allowed in the given sport. Boxers tend to blade their body a little more to present less of a target, less of a scoring area. Taekwondo, they'll keep their hands down at their sides because they're not worried about punches to the head or the face. They're worried about kicks to the hogu, the scoring area. So, one of my favorite training partners when I was growing up, little backstory, we used to do like just full contact with boxing gloves and headgear on mouthpieces. But a bunch of my buddies that did martial arts all throughout high school, every weekend we'd get together and we'd fight each other and just beat the living snot out of each other. And we had different styles represented. One of my best friends was a boxer. He knocked me completely unconscious. First time in my entire life I've ever been knocked out. And that's when I was training specifically in Wing Chun. And that was the exposure moment of like, oh, I need to make adaptations. I need to find something that works. So I got into boxing, and then I delved back into martial arts via MMA when the popularity of that started to grow. But one of my favorite training partners was a Taekwondo guy, and he trained in WTF Taekwondo. So he had a very, competitive Olympic style Taekwondo background. And he would do that. He'd keep his hands at his sides. He was very agile, bouncing around, throwing a lot of cool kicks. And when we would fight, we would do essentially MMA rules. So the first time I punched him in the face, he like stopped. He's like, "You can't do that." I was like, "What are you talking about? This isn't WTF Taekwondo, bro. We're fighting." Next thing you know, his hands are starting to come up and he's starting to change his stance, and then things start to fall apart in the system because, like you said, Rob, he wasn't adaptable. He had spent so much time. Now, the dude was fantastic at throwing. He had some of the most beautiful kicks and incredible agility I've ever seen, and I give him props for that. But he wasn't prepared for the holistic approach to fighting. And you see it in MMA, and I see it in the law enforcement side too, because we have to be prepared for all things in law enforcement we put hands on, and so adaptability is paramount. Um, so no, I totally agree with everything you're saying per usual.
No, yeah, yeah, that's just like in MMA. Like we see, they go, okay, I want to be a better striker, a better boxer. So they train with boxing trainers, and they learn to box like a boxer with big gloves, shoulder rolling, Philly shell, high guard. Then boom, gloves are off. Now you got little tiny gloves. All those shots get through. It just has to change. It's this, or wrestlers, when wrestlers jump into submission grappling, they're shooting all their same takedowns or doubles and their necks exposed and they get guillotined. Like the guillotine is stops the majority of wrestlers until guess what? They put their head in there, they adapt. Now they can't guillotine them anymore, and now they're taking it down. But it has to adapt. That's why we look at a lot of stand-up exchanges and submission grappling, ADCC, I always say CGI, CJI, and you watch and you're like, oh, these guys are not good wrestlers. Well, it's much different when somebody can choke you. When somebody can do this stuff, so it has to adapt and change, you know. So it's just based on the rule set, limit it or not limit it, and what's going to happen. And then you have to see it play out. The live environment has to take form. That's why you'll see in all these in grappling, there's so many different rule sets, right? And then you're like, oh, I got the perfect way to make this exciting grappling. And everybody comes up with the rule set, and then a new tournament comes out. And guess what happens already after the first event? All the grapplers, all the competitors start gaming the rules because it's still a sport, it's still a contest, and they're going to adapt to those rules. And then that's why you see all these different rule sets and different ways to grapple come out of it. It's just that's what's going to happen. You have to run it. You have to run it live, and you have to see what is happening. If that makes sense, what I'm saying, I'm pretty sure it does.
No, it makes absolute sense. And you talk about like I cracked up a little bit when you said gaming the system because it is still a sport. There's still constraints. There's stuff you have to do, and you have to follow those rules. But when it comes, like you're saying, when it comes to real life, like putting it all together, MMA, I still will say it's probably the closest you're going to get to
Huh.
actual fighting, minus like the weird one-offs. Like there's some underground fight thing that you can watch on YouTube where they just basically fight on a concrete floor and just are asking to have their, the worst
Yeah.
concussion ever. But still, there's still rules there, and
Yeah.
um,
Well, yeah, you see these posts on Reddit or whatever stuff. I'm sure you're saying somebody goes, "Oh, what's the best self defense martial art?" Just go to an MMA gym, scrap, get punched, get kicked. It's not fun, but that's the reality of it. If you want the closest form of what you consider self defense or one on one fighting, you're gonna have to get in there and fight. It's just if you want to be good at it, you're gonna have to jump in there and scrap.
Well,
That's just the way you're. It's
and
not a magic technique.
No, 100%. The one thing I would add too is, you get the self-defense purists and they'll say, well, what about weapons? Okay, well then have some training weapons that periodically you throw in the mix and see if you can control them, retain them, or take them
Yeah,
away. And then you're filling in the void because it kills me when you have people that think that they have some system that, oh, you have to do Filipino martial arts to train against the blade. Bullshit. Because the fight isn't going to look like what they train anyway. It's the exact same conversation we had about Wing Chun versus Wing Chun, Taekwondo versus Taekwondo. All those traditional systems, like you said, there are inherently good products in them. I tend to tell people the things that remain consistent from style to style are probably the things that work. The things that stay very exclusive to those traditional martial arts are probably the things that evolved when that system started getting too much, too closed door and started training against themselves. And Filipino martial arts is the same thing because now you see, no offense to anybody that's listening to Saya Kali, there's, like I said, there are good things in it, but you have them wearing these like kits now with like six different blades, and they do drops and switches and all this stuff against somebody else who has six blade training blades on them. And I'm like, that's not representative of reality. That's not how somebody is going to try to stab you. They're not going to fight you knife for knife. And
yeah,
so, like when you take, I agree with you. Take MMA as your foundation. You can learn how to manipulate a body against a body, defend against strikes, defend against holds, escape bad positions, control good ones, and then periodically, and I'll do this at my gym for the people that are interested, we'll throw in a training blade or a training gun, and we'll introduce it in chaotic ways because that's how
yeah.
it gets introduced in a
That's
fight.
how it's gonna be. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can't exactly replicate it. We know, but you can at least throw it out there to see if it happens.
Yep.
Like when I was doing Jeet Kune Do concepts, we used to do Kali and the knife and all that stuff. But also, because the way I've always been, I'm watching VHS tapes of the Dog Brothers. I don't know if you've heard of the Dog Brothers, which is an old '80s, '90s group of um, hardcore stick knife fighters based off the Jeet Kune Do system. So what they would do, they would have these gatherings in California, and they would all meet up at a park, and they would only wear a fencing headgear and maybe hand gear, like hockey gloves, and they would go full contact stick fighting. So there was none of the beautiful collie spins and this and that. They just tried to hit each other as hard as they could. And that's what they did. So they understood this is real stick fighting. And they would take you can walk through a full stick shot to the body. And then they had grappling and they would do takedowns and they would hit with the stick. So we started doing that. Me and a couple buddies and my Jeet Kune Do. We go to my friend's house. He had a big backyard, and we did the same thing. We had the helmet, the hand pad, and we do full contact stick fighting, and just hit each other as hard as we could. And then that's what you see what really works. And even then, you have the headgear in the hand, but it was way more representative than these huge Kali costumes where you could get a hit 100 times and nothing happens to you. So I've always been on that chase of representativeness and what's the closest we could get, to what actually is happening.
Yeah, because I'm a purveyor of fucked up internet videos. So like if you actually watch, like you said, people knife fighting, people hit each other with sticks, there's no beauty to it. It's what works
No,
and sometimes like Randy talks about like throwing the chaos. You throw a knife in the chaos, and it made me think immediately of Saving Private Ryan, where like
oh yeah,
it immediately makes me think of like that's probably the most realistic like hand to hand. One guy has a knife fight. They're just rolling all over each other, really trying just to not get stabbed.
yeah.
And
We used
there's
to do. Yeah, sorry, I cut you off. Go,
oh
keep
no,
going.
you're fine. It's a cool thing about a podcast. Like jump in, cut me off. Like I don't care. It's great.
Yeah,
I love it.
yeah,
So, but yeah, like that's the representation of it, and it just all ties back up. Like I'm not training knife defense to fight, this dude who like a Collier slot fighter. I'm training because this guy's like, all right, well now I've got your wallet and your cell phone because I'm not fighting somebody over that. Like now you're going to come with me, or she's coming with me, and I'm like, no, we're not. We're not doing that. Like that's where it is. I'm not training to fight the assassin that somebody hired to send after
yeah,
me because I wronged them. Like, my family
yeah,
lineage, it turned out to be a prince or some bullshit like that. They're like, you have to get rid of the real heir. Like, I'm not training for that.
yeah,
That's not happening.
yeah. Well, yeah. So we used to do in the Jeet Kune Do. We showed the power of the knife. We would wear, you wear a white T-shirt, and then you had a permanent marker or some type of marker, and they would even say, get a teenage kid, give them a marker, and let them attack you and see what you can do against that. And then they look at their shirt and they're all marked up from a kid, a teenager trying to attack them with a magic marker. Now imagine that's a knife. Like that's the reality of it. You're not going to get these beautiful counters and stop the knife and hold it and knife disarms. These things don't happen. You could get because untrained people or people are just trying to survive. They're not going to do the classic way you fight with the knife. It's the old Jim Carrey skit from In Living Color, where he's the karate master and he says, "Attack me with this knife," and he shows the lady how to attack him with like overhead diagonal strikes, and then she comes down at him and catches him in the ribs or whatever, and he's like screaming. He's like, "It's okay, I moved my internal organs," and then she comes out again and stabs him again. It's a great skit. Watch old Jim Carrey and Living Color karate. But that's what kind of people are teaching. You have to attack me this right way. You have to attack me this for my knife stuff to work. And basically, what that's going to happen if you're teaching, people that you're going to get people hurt. You're going to get people killed if they think that's what knife defense is.
Well, and
If they think that's what self defense is, and you're just going to get. I've always hated that. I've been watching this for 30 years, and people are still going to schools doing this or learning deft touches or pressure points or all this stuff. It's all nonsense. It's garbage. You got to get in there and really fight somebody against resistance to see what actually can and can't work.
And that's why I think too it's important to introduce some like especially knives, guns too sometimes if you're not situationally aware. Um, but I'll teach my students about the presence of the elbow flare. The 45-degree angle elbow flare is like a precursor to a draw because that's something you should be paying attention to. But knives get introduced into fights unknowingly all the time, and a lot of times the victim doesn't know until they've already been stabbed, and they usually say it felt like a punch prior to actually feeling any pain or seeing any blood. And so introducing the training blades into an environment where it's unexpected is actually more representative anyway, rather than having
Yeah,
them square off and be looking at the blade and then worried about defending it. And it's funny, what emerges a lot of times is 2-on-1s. That's one of the most consistent things that I see come up every single time I introduce a training blade, unknowingly or in a chaotic situation, is the grappler tends to intuitively start to go into their 2-on-1 stuff because they understand that they have to prioritize their threats and keep control of the hand that's got the weapon. And it changes the way you approach your grappling when that becomes your focal point rather than submissions. So with all that, what would a typical day on the mats with Rob Cole look like? If I came to your class, you were coaching it, what would that look like?
Um, well, first we do we warm up with some shrimps. Some no, I'm just joking. No shrimps. Um, First we start out with it's just right to work. I'll change it sometimes. I was playing with hey, let's just I had a good way to kind of make not really flow rolling, but just people to get engaged more and not worry about it, just to get warmed up their whole body. And I would introduce some constraints. So it's like a grappling round. I would go no submissions, no throws. um, you can't you cannot lock your hands at any moment. That's my favorite constraint currently of almost all my games. So we could talk about that later. Not lock your hands, so no gripping, no grasping together, so it doesn't slow down the action. And then if you're on any type of top position, top, behind, they're internal, your knees have to stay off the mat. So to me, all those rules kind of promote everybody moving, getting warmed up, exploring the space, and just using their whole body. So that was one warm up style I was doing. And then now I'm doing more of a hand fighting one where you're just looking to control the head, elbows, and hands, 2-on-1 grips, and you just fight through that. So I want people moving. Everything always starts standing for me. I think that's the easiest way to get people moving, and you don't have to have takedowns in the mix. You just have to have, good standing things. So we get people warmed up like that. And then we always go into, there's always standing games. That's how at least the first 10, 15 minutes of my class. I've been doing more here and there because I'm really into the standing wrestling engagements now. I think it's the most overlooked part of grappling, especially if you're traditional Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or you're using the gi. There's always just so much guard pulling, and people don't want to do anything on their feet, which I think is pretty ridiculous at this point. But so we start everything wrestling, standing, but take away a lot of the takedowns and the stuff that are going to get people hurt or people are afraid of. So it'll be a lot of standing situations where we're just looking to complete tasks. Can I get two hands on the mat? Can I get a foot off the mat? Can I get behind them? So I work through all tasks through usually connected positions first because that lessens the variability. So especially with newer people or people who are not as good, it lessens the chaos, which naturally we're going to have. So we're going to run through a couple games like that, depending on what my focus is. And then we'll run through all the standing games, build off of that, depending what skills I'm looking to work towards. Then after that, maybe we'll go, I like to bring it down to the floor and then usually do a pinning type games, because the pinning games makes you understand why we play guard. Like if you throw people right into the guard, they're not understand why they're even in a guard. What is this? So throw them in pinning first. They understand why they need to use their legs, and then we'll back it out to more of a guard passing type game. And then we're going to run through that. So we're hitting all these stages. We're hitting standing, passing, guard it, and then pinning. And then depending, maybe some submissions thrown in. It just depends what I'm trying to work on for that week or whatever I'm doing. But we're always kind of trying to, the thing people are saying, play the whole game, because I teach submission grappling. I don't really consider myself Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I never really was, even though I learned it. I think that's just a different subset. I'm more into submission grappling. And I think that, to me, side note, I believe that is the MMA of all these grappling arts. It's got it's got the least amount of rules, more variability, and I see that as the MMA version of grappling. So submission grappling, and then you have judo, sambo, and all that other stuff. So I know I went on a tangent but that's kind of my typical class structure of what I like to do.
No, I do like it was funny. I was actually talking with my judo coach about this the other day of like submission grappling. Like, what are some of the things you can do? We are talking about face locks. Like most Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, judo, even sambo, like it's not allowed. Like you can't face lock people, but like it's a perfectly good submission in, like in submission wrestling and things like that. So, um, I'm interested to hear about like the pinning games though, because it is kind of don't kill me, guys, but I had not YouTube. I'm in the audience. I've been dabbling with these constraint based games, and don't tell anybody. Except I just put it out there. But no, so the transition from because like I start my warm ups in class, I'm like move somebody, like get them off balance, like Randy does. So I was like, this is awesome. I need to do that. But can you explain a little bit more about the pinning variation of these games? I'm kind of interested in that actually.
Well, yeah, and a lot of my influence, especially the last couple of years, is more from folk style wrestling, college wrestling, this and that, because I look at these sports, like we were talking earlier, and all the constraints and the rules of the sports. This is how their style emerges, right? You'll hear that word. This is how the style emerges. Folk style wrestlers are probably the best at pinning somebody because that's how you can win the whole match just by a pin. You don't see them as frequent because people are so good at stopping the pinning in wrestling, but the pinning, the riding time, holding somebody down, that is part of folk style wrestling. It's not part of Greco, that version as much, or freestyle. You have some mat wrestling, but the mat wrestling and folk style college is great. Judo has it also, obviously with the pin, but that's more gi based and a little different. I like the folk style, and you'll see actually why folk style wrestlers go into MMA and do better than the other forms of grappling. Folk style has that pinning, that control, that top heavy, uh, all the way. So what I did is I took a lot of stuff. I call it like a folk fusion style of submission grappling. So I take that and then I put these people in these things, and I use kind of and if you don't know, in folk style wrestling, you cannot lock your hands. So like a body lock around, if unless that person stands up. If they're on the floor, like from the referee's position, you can't lock your hands in folk style. So in freestyle and others, you can lock your hands, and the body lock is such a huge, it's such a strong hold that people always default to that in these other styles. But in folk styles, you can't do that. So what does that make you do? It makes you learn claw grips, spiral rides, half Nelson, all these different ways to control somebody without locking your hands. So what I do is I've taken that now and I've put that to almost everywhere. So in the pinning games, when I taught, I just taught at the second ecological dynamics for submission grappling camp we had out there, and I did like power ride, leg riding, shin riding, pinning games. Like Craig Jones influence, that's which he got from folk style, pretty much. So that's where I get it from. I watch a lot of college wrestling now. The last couple of years, I don't really watch as much grappling because everybody's kind of already exploring that. I want to explore these different ways. So I use the constraint everywhere of not allowing people to connect their hands. So I'll start them in different pinning variations. It could be mount with double unders, but you can't connect your hands. Referee position, you can't connect your hands, and they have to explore all those different ways. And that what that does, it gives that defensive player the ability to hand fight and work trying to attack their hands and separating them, so they're able to get back to their feet. Everybody on the bottom, no matter what, I don't care if it's jujitsu, whatever, street fight, MMA, if you're on the bottom at some point, you should have the ability to try to get back to your feet. And when you do that, that opens up everything else. It opens up the guard pulls and any other thing you want. But the core, and you guys are you guys both police department or just Randy?
Just Randy.
Okay, yeah. So I was thinking this the other day. It's like in just a live police environment, one of the most, in my opinion, I've never done it. The most important skill you can have is getting off the ground or holding somebody on the ground. So this skill translates to everywhere. It translates to MMA. It translates just stand up, all this type of thing. So this is a huge skill we need to work on. And if we take this folk style, we take these wrestlers, they're the best at doing it. What are they doing that gets them there? And with the unlocked hands, I think I was just watching there's an Olympic champion from Japan, I think Hayaguchi, I believe his name is. He just won the Olympic gold, and he said he wants to train. He just said this about a month ago. He wants to learn folk style because some of the toughest guys he goes against are folk style wrestlers, and he thinks it's because they don't lock their hands and they have these strong forearms and grips that he doesn't face internationally, but he always goes against folk style wrestlers because they have this ability to hold and do that without, because they're not so into the body lock of blocking their hands because they can't. So that's created that. So that's where I base all my kind of pinning and controlling. And now I'm bringing it everywhere of just not locking the hands. So I try to work off these concepts. This is one of my other jujitsu rants I do is if you're going to, you tell me about a concept, which is great. You could talk about a concept all day, but how do you train it? Without showing me a technique, without showing me how exactly to do it, how do you train a concept? And this is how I can train these concepts like this through this constraint led approach. So that's one of my main default constraints I've been working with. And it's through the unlocked hands. And then top player, stay on top, hold the partner down. That's, just how it is. And, or you're on the back, stay on their back. That's a top position to me. That works in my neutral top bottom framework, which is how I base all my games off of. So, yeah, that's pretty much how I run like the pinning type stuff, where if the effort is to try to get back to your feet. It doesn't stop until or like one knee up because I don't want anybody standing up fully and getting slammed back down to the ground. I take out that danger part of it. So that's how I kind of work through it. Where I love the pinning games are a huge part of it.
So you actually just like kind of touched on something that I think you quantified it better than I ever have when I try to explain to people how, well, I guess why CLA and ecological dynamics kind of spoke to me when I learned about it, you said it right there when you talked about concepts. Because prior to ever learning about ecological dynamics, theory to skill acquisition, or constraints-led approach, I was already trying to find a way to teach classes based solely on concepts and principles alone because I'd already started to recognize kind of the limitation of the perfect technique or the ideal technique. Especially because of the law enforcement training and all the stuff there, like every situation being so chaotically different, different body types, different everything. I was already starting to realize that, but you just said it better than I think that's how I'm going to explain it from now on is how do you teach a concept? And we know that the concepts are the things that remain pretty reliable versus actual techniques, right? Because where does the technique start? Where does it end? And that question's impossible to answer in most examples. So that's beautiful stuff, and I definitely agree. I spent a lot of time doing the exact same kind of setup to starting standing, getting to the ground. But I was doing at least the last couple of months, I've been doing the a guard game or guard based game before pinning. Now I'm probably going to try to flip that around because it makes more sense the way that you explained it. To do the pinning game before the guarded game because it gives them kind of a little bit more explanation as to why they'd want to bring their legs into the fray en route to getting back to a neutral position or back to standing. So I definitely like that. Other Rob, so we got two Robs on here right now. Uh, I'll send you a link. He has a couple really that just stand up game is awesome. But there's a game that Rob Cole plays where he's kind of talking about like the shin rides and stuff like that. I've played it before at TFTC. It is so much fun. I love it. Everybody loves it. Um, so definitely some fantastic content there. Some good stuff.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out and see what it looks like and try it out with some of my folks. And to kind of segue into another, what is it? Another subject because it's something I know is coming up, multiple camps. So you're an instructor with BJJ Globetrotters, and how'd you get involved with them?
Yeah, I think it was during when COVID first started and nobody was really training, nobody knew what was going on. And, and which is funny, I've always been a huge fan of instructionals. It's kind of funny, you hear the CLA stuff and Eco and they're like, instructors are worthless and all this stuff. No, they're not. They're maybe the way we look at them is a little different. The price point is a little outrageous. I don't think we need 12 hours of content for $500, on something. I think the market will change. I'm already seeing people starting to change that already. But I've always liked watching instructionals from the 90s on. I used to have VHS tapes of, Jeet Kune Do, MMA, all this stuff. So I was on, COVID started. I'm watching a lot of instructionals here and there, just surfing around YouTube. But I've always been like Randy was saying, I've always been a concept person. I didn't know. I just enjoy that. I enjoy training and I enjoy talking about training. So when I wasn't able to train, let me watch some stuff and kind of figure out what's going on. And then I started watching a couple. I think I seen like it was probably Preet Mickelson, the defensive jiu-jitsu guy, and I was watching him do some seminars. I'm like, this is very different. I love when people are talking about stuff that other people are not. I've always had a thing in my life where it's like, if everybody's saying do this, I'd rather explore what they're saying not to do. So I'm watching the defensive jiu-jitsu stuff, and that started resonating with me with Preet. And then, Chris Paines has his good stuff, Christian Grauger, a lot of good different, and I'm still watching, Lachlan Giles stuff. I'm just absorbing all this stuff because I had no other, I really wasn't training. So I'm watching this stuff and I'm like, hey, these Globetrotter guys, dude. I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll go to a camp. I kind of just got interested in it and I wanted to go. And then COVID, and, I'm in America, obviously, and they only have the Maine and Arizona camps. And then one of them got canceled or delayed because of COVID. Then I forgot about it again. And then I started talking with Preet a lot, through Facebook and messages and different things, interested in his system. And I actually started training his funny part, segue, started training his defensive jiu-jitsu stuff through watching his videos. And then me and my daughter, she was 12 at the time, and she only started jiu-jitsu maybe 6 months prior to that. And then COVID happened and we weren't training. And I just had some like kid play mats in the middle of the living room, like half inch thick. So not good on a late 40-year-old body. And me and her would just train in the living room, and I would just train the defensive postures and let her attack me, which is funny because what was I doing? I taught myself through a set of constraints. This is before I started training through the ecological constraint-led approach. And I kept my elbows to my sides. I moved to the thing. I followed all the constraints of that and let my daughter do anything she wanted. And I started developing this defensive stuff. And I started noticing she got really good at attacking the opening spaces. I wasn't teaching her any technique at the time through that, just attacking the open spaces. And then I started training my buddies in little garage sessions, and I was stopping them. And now these are adults, purple belts, brown belts, whatever. And they're like, wow, that stuff's really, kind of working. So I just had to scale it up from going against a kid to an adult, but the concept itself stayed the same. So I'm like, this is really cool. I still want to get more involved in the Globetrotter stuff, messaging with Pre, this and that. And then I went to a main camp, and I talked with Christian and those guys. And then I did that first camp. And then I said, hey, I'm going to go do the Arizona camp. If you're looking for instructors, I said, hey, yeah, we'll give you a shot to be an instructor in Arizona. And then, so I coached in Arizona my first time. And now I've done the main Arizona camp like every year in the last 3 years. And my next one's in 2 weeks, the main camp. So it's just a really good environment, 20, 30 black belts or more, multiple, 2 open mats a day, which is always great. The seminars are great. The instructors are great, but it's really cool to get to roll with so many different people, and you see that different style. So the stuff you think work, like we talked about, you're always going against. A lot of times at the gym, we train against the same people all the time, and the roles kind of start looking the same. So that's why I always say, go cross train at other gyms, go to different open mats. Some of my students, one of my students, very good competitor, 16 years old, has won all the tournaments. Say, hey, go train at other gyms, go to their open mats, go against different people. You need those touches against all different types of things. So if you go to like a Globetrotters camp for a week, you're going to roll with people from Canada, from Europe, from different parts of the country, and you're just going to get to immerse yourself in like all these different varieties of roles. And that's, I just like that style. I think a lot of the Globetrotter coaches a lot of them are more into, hey, let's try something different. Now you'll see, Preet Mickelson got into the eco constraint led approach. Francisco did. There's a couple others that are playing around with it. So they're definitely less traditional. I am not traditional minded. Even though I came up in those systems and I appreciate what the past has done before, but I think if you stick in the traditional mindset, you're never really going to grow. And I've never been that way. So I just kind of, that Globetrotter element kind of vibes with me more than the traditional, this is how you have to do it and whatever. So it's just a very eclectic group. And I've always been part of that. I was submission grappler with Frank. I was Judo concepts. I was doing gi, no gi. I've been doing leg locks since the late 90s. when everybody thought they weren't good. And then, Danaher and them, they started beating everybody. I'm like, hey man, we've been doing these leg lock stuff in the late 90s. This is great stuff. So that's kind of how I got involved with the Globetrotters. I just like that eclectic, non-traditional format.
I mean, I love the Globetrotters, so I've been to a few camps myself. I'm actually going to the Arizona one this year, finally. Like, I've done
Oh, I'll be
yeah,
there. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
Yep.
it'll be good. I'm trying to get Randy to go because he
Hey,
needs
I
to.
I love Arizona. I was just there a few weeks ago. I absolutely love Arizona, and if I can make it happen, I will definitely be there. I want to. That it's like high up on my priority list. I just got to make sure I get the time and everything. But
Yeah.
I would say there's a better than 50% chance I'll be there.
Well, maybe I'm already mad at you because you didn't make it to the eco camp in Massachusetts. You didn't
That
make it, man.
I'm
That was the one
jealous.
to. Oh, that was the one to be at. That was a fun one.
No, I already said I will move everything in my schedule to be at the next one because that looks like such a great time. So
Yeah, that was a fun one. That was good.
Well, good. I'm pumped for this camp. Like, I like the Heidelberg. I've done Heidelberg twice. Went to
Oh,
Austria. I
nice.
like did Iceland camp. Like, it's. I'm not gonna make this last one, the last Iceland camp, but I do like the organization. I made some really good friends. So I've actually met my Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, my coach through Globetrotter. So
Oh, nice. Yeah,
absolutely love.
right now I consider myself more the U.S. trotter because I'm just mostly doing Maine and Arizona. But
Yeah,
I definitely want to go do the farther camps when I get a chance. But with a wife and kid, it's like it'd be good if we could kind of do something more together, and take a whole trip instead of like, hey, I'm going out and teaching in Iceland for a week. See ya. I'll leave you out in Connecticut or whatever. Doesn't work out as great for me. So we'll see. We'll see what I can make happen.
real quick, just to backtrack on one thing for a second, because I wanted to pick your brain selfishly about this.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
this is something I've seen when I'm running practice is when I've got a group of, 15, 20 people on the mat, paired up, or sometimes tripled up, depending on what we're working on. Um, it becomes very difficult, and I have some ways I do it. I just don't know if they're the optimal ways to do it. To see what I need to adjust in the room, and then so what do you look for, and then how do you make those adjustments based on what you're seeing in your games and in practice?
Well, I think that's the process you're just like you've probably experienced. You're just gonna have to go through it at first. So like even sometimes in my class, I'll the first say, hey, I'll just like be like experimental game, because I had something I was thinking about in my head, and I'm working on it. I'm like, boom, I throw it in and I say, okay, and then I'll watch, see what's happening. And then what I try to do is I try to look and go, okay, does this really kind of look like good grappling? Not to say the right way or whatever, but are people gaming the game the way to win it that doesn't really look like it's not how it's supposed to, if you know what I'm saying? Like doing this weird, silly thing that can happen, and you're like, okay, now I need to add another constraint. This is a little too much of, or it starts turning into more of an open roll, right? It turns into positional sparring or what perceives to look like positional sparring. And then I go, okay, let's add another constraint, but it's got to be happening for the majority of the room. So like there's a good, we were talking about this at the last eco camp also. So if you have 10 people and one person's not really getting it, that's probably more on the person and you kind of got to guide them. But if like 7 people are not following the rules or constraints of the game, that's on you. That's just not a great design game, which has happened to me multiple times. So I'll just say, all right, stop, let's throw in this constraint and see what happens. And I'll talk with a couple of the better ones, or which I think you've talked about this before too. I actually like to jump in when I can. If there's I hate when people have to sit out if they don't have a partner. So I'll jump in and it's somebody who's usually is not as good. So I can still kind of look at the room while I'm training because I want to see if I can game on this game. Like we are saying with the UFC and all these styles, you don't know what's happening until you run the game. Like it could be the most perfect thought in your head game with the constraints. You could write it down. You could put game for every possible scenario. Then you put it in, and then boom, then it just looks like it's not working. So I like to kind of see what's going on, see if I can adjust it, see what I can place, and if somebody's doing that to me, or just kind of watching. So It's kind of like where they talk about, oh, all these eco CLA coaches, they're just lazy. They're just sitting back and running these games. Oh man, it's so much harder to coach like this. The the old traditional format's so easy. Somebody can ask me to come teach a 2 hour beer and bowl seminar, and I'd be able to do that like just jumping out of bed. Running classes and designing games and adding constraints and all that stuff, that takes a lot of work. It's a lot of, but it makes you better at doing it. So it's like that repetition without repetition of coaching. You're not going to get it great at first. You're not going to be, and even after a couple of years, I'm still finding things I need to adjust and train and adapt all the time. It's not like going to be a cookie cutter approach. So I kind of look for things that, does this, like if I'm running a wrestling style game or a stand up game, and if I'm just seeing stuff that's like, oh my God, this is this too much. Now I'm going to have to add a constraint on that. I want it to not look right, if you know what I'm saying, or it just has to be, it has to look a little, I don't know, more efficient or a little what you're going to see. But sometimes I like the novelty where everything's all out of control because you could kind of play with that and then we could tighten it up. It's definitely a process of trial and error for the coach because you've experienced this. I'm sure you're learning as much as the students are learning, if not more, on how to design these games to get these. And they're just training. Like they don't need to know about all the science and the constraints and the four principles and all that. They're just there to train. And now we have to kind of collect that data and watch and just kind of see it, so you see what's happening, if that makes sense.
Totally. It's funny because I had a student that's come up, he has a little bit of grappling background, but he came to us as a white belt, pretty limited exposure to jiu-jitsu specifically. I think he trained a little bit more judo prior to coming to us. And he's actually my first blue belt I've ever awarded. But he trains with us and he comes every Friday to the CLA class I run. And it's just this past Friday, I was checking in with him to see I mean, he's a stud. He goes and he gives purple belts and brown belts a fit, which is good to see. But he, he always stays because he's so used to this method. He's always just very, very checked in on like what he's trying to achieve, and he's always got a clear attention of what he's working on, and he adapts to any style he's grappling against because he's more problem focused than like trying to regurgitate something. But it was ironic because that's like his strength is his adaptability. But then this past Friday, he when I was checking with him, he made an odd comment. He said, he's like, I feel like I need more technique. He's like, I
Yeah.
feel like I need you to teach me more technique, or at least like what I should be doing in these games. And I was kind of puzzled because I was like, I was literally just getting ready to tell you that you're phenomenal at just adapting on the fly. And like he's doing so many things right, for lack of a better term. I mean, he's not getting caught with stupid submissions and he's not like he's imposing on a lot of people. He's really, really good. So I didn't know how to answer that. And I was just like, hey man, I appreciate the feedback. Let me see what I can work on. But
That might be. I think when people think so much even if they're doing it right or whatever, it's still like the technique aspect of it. And I think you could kind of, maybe you need to gauge him more towards end game type submissions or
okay.
end game type scenarios and put him focused there because there's going to be less variability in there, and you're going to really hone in on those tasks at the end, and it's going to look and feel much more like, hey, I learned this technique of this arm bar and this and that. And you could kind of feel in these end stages, there's less variability, so there's less options. So it's going to look more or feel more like, oh, I got that technique, however you want to describe it, you know. So bring them more towards those end stages and have them work from there back out. I always love the end stage back out method. I do that for everything. That's why pinning, I do almost end stage of that pin, then back out. End stage of the passing. When I teach all my passing stuff or my seminars, passing without technique, I call it. I start at that end stage of passing where they just only have your ankle, quarter guard, 3/4 mount scenarios, double under. You're pretty much only have a couple out options to go for both players. So it's going to be more constrained naturally because it's the end stage. You can't do as much. And now we back it out. We play in that area. Then we back it out just a little more. Maybe now just your knee's caught. Now you have to free your knee and then free your ankle. instead of just freeing your ankle. And then we back it out even more. And then the hand fighting. So it looks more and feels more like a technique type style, but you're playing at these end stages and then backing them out. So now you know where you need to end up and you need to know where you need to go, but you're doing it from that perspective. I love that way to do it. So, like when I teach my just stand up, I teach it sometimes from the top down, from standing up, and then we bring it down to the bottom. So you can always play with these back in and back out from where you want to be.
No, that's great. That's awesome stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate the insight on that. That is pretty cool. I mean, like I do enjoy the game, so I keep saying it. Like I don't know, I'm still on the fence, so I apologize. Maybe one day I'll convert. I don't know, but I'm
No,
always
you
open to it.
come convert, come to the cult of Vico. We accept you. You can bring it in. Just you leave your techniques at the door, and then we'll bring you in.
Great news. I have no technique. I mean, so
Oh,
we're
there you
already
go. It's like that meme. Yeah, you can't have it if you don't have any technique.
exactly,
Can't bring
yeah, we're
technique.
good. But
No, if you just play in these situations more in these games and constantly live stuff, to me, I've been doing this a long time. It's just more engaging and it's fun. It's fun. Like effort. Put in that work. Put in that effort. Get in there. It's just going to make more adaptable. It's a huge part of like I don't even see it as just even martial arts anymore. And I know Randy about this. We're talking about strength and conditioning is mixed in. And now I even use the same thoughts and philosophy of the ecological approach and constraint when I'm doing my strength and conditioning. What am I working on? And it's all intertwined. I'm like that guy. With the detective board in the back, all stressed out. Everything's connected with the red lines all over. Grappling is just more health and fitness, more physical. They're all connected together, and you could just start weaving all this together and just make the best physical self you can. Grappler, striker, whatever you want to do. Conditioning. It's all intertwined, and this style of training gets you better conditioned for grappling or for anything else.
I mean, it's good insight. Like you said, everything is connected. I do, I'll be interested to see like how it plays out with strength and conditioning for like how to work that. So because that's always been a maybe mine's not super constraint based because like I need to do it a certain way only because of like injuries, but like I'd be interested
Yeah.
to see like how that plays
Well,
out too.
injuries are a constraint.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, so you will adapt to that constraint of your injury or whatever you're working on. I'm 50 years old. I'm all busted up here and there and this and that, but I've actually healed myself a lot these last couple of years anyway. But that the constraint is just your injuries, where the whole ecological approach, dynamics or whatever. It's all based on what you as a person, your physical constraints, your whatever how you feel that day or this and that, and then when you're working on these strength and condition stuff, sometimes it's task focused. Better to say than having perfect form or perfect technique, concentrate on the task. The task will self organize to how you're going to move. Or say, like I do a lot of plyometric stuff. The task goal of putting a marker and then trying to jump past that marker or getting that height. Well, that's all it is. It's just a task focused way. And you're going to organize. Telling somebody how to jump up onto a box with 45-degree angle, butt, push, toes, this and that, it doesn't mean anything to a person. But if you get on top of that box or not, or you fall, you're going to get there and you're going to self-organize toward your body constraints or your injuries or whatever to get onto that height you need to. And then we're going to adapt it, progressively overload it, give it that whatever, and we're just going to build off that. Or we're going to throw in more variability. And then we could do single leg bounds or this type of hops or diagonal or whatever you want to do. And you're just going to keep adapting to that. So there's my strength and conditioning rant
I
also.
I guess the box squat is like the original constraint then.
Yeah. Or I meant box jump. Yeah, box
No, no,
jump.
no.
Yeah.
No, I meant like West Side Barbell doing the old box squats. I guess that's like the original constraint because you're having to squat to the box, right? As a point of
Yeah.
reference. I know a lot of people box squat isn't meant to be a rehab exercise like that or a teaching thing. I'm just saying it as a case in point. Like I know CrossFit days they would squat to med balls and stuff like that as like a point of reference. But
Yep.
there's validity to it. At least you're teaching them proper depth and enforcing a little bit more of that hip hinge movement pattern. So
That's so funny you brought that up with Westside. I've just recently, over the last, I've been trying to reorganize all my strength and conditioning because I'm more obsessed with that than anything currently. And I've been trying to understand the principles of the conjugate method, which the Westside barbell people popularized, taking it from the Soviet system and the Bulgarian methods and all that stuff. So I'm diving in deep into this conjugate style because I'm seeing a lot of the parallels with it, a lot of variability, the self, no, the variability, which leads to less overuse injuries that we talk about using the constraint-led approach instead of drilling. The different ways they set up you have the max effort method, the dynamic effort method, the repetition effort method, just to getting all these different variabilities, the way they split up their training blocks. Like I'm trying to dive deep in that too, because it's easy for me to understand it now as I've been messing around with this ecological constraint-led approach. I'm seeing a lot of different parallels with it. So I'm not sure if it's the right way or the whatever, but it's something I'm going to play with. I'm going to have to try it myself.
Well,
I'm going to run through that trial and error.
yeah, I mean, you think about it. I mean, it makes sense to move through variations of the different things you're working on. So you're doing, if you're wanting to strengthen your posterior chain, there's a lot of variation in the exercise you can select from, and by being variable in that, you're probably reducing the risk of overuse injuries because you're changing the way you're moving your body. Uh, reference that demand. So I'd like to change my stuff around quite a bit. I know what I'm targeting. I know what my focus is for that session, but I like to change things around, especially based on how I'm feeling. Am I putting myself in a bad way to try to go into this particular movement, and then maybe I'm better off selecting something else that targets the same area in a different way. So I'm kind of doing some of the same stuff you are. I did conjugate for a little while. It didn't last long because it started to impact my job and my jiu-jitsu, and so I had to shift gears. There's ways to do it 3 times a week. I was like, I'm just going to go back to something a little bit more
Yeah,
streamlined. But
that's the condensed conjugate method.
yeah,
Phil
yeah.
Daru, I think, talks about that. He's an MMA coach. But even then, I've been changing out my exercises forever because I get bored on things.
Hmm.
So I always done that. But now I'm going to say, hey, what's the system behind that I can kind of adapt myself and use it? Because I've always like, I watch these videos on strength conditioning, like, this is the perfect rep, the perfect form. And it's like, you have to do these to get, I'm like, okay, you're doing bounding and you're just jumping as far as you can.
Hmm.
Okay, I have a hill in my front yard. I do diagonal uphill bounding. You're telling me that's not the right way to do it? I'm getting more variability, more adapting. And then maybe in a couple of weeks, I'll shift to regular bounding or I'll do a single leg version or whatever. As long as you're moving, what is training? What is the stimulus you provide? That's the adaptations you're going to get for better or for worse, right? If you do nothing, your body will adapt to said principle, specific adaptation to interpose demands. You get really good at doing nothing. If you're moving around a lot, you get better. Whatever training stimulus you provide, that's what you're going to adapt to. There's obviously more efficient ways and better ways to do that, but that's the only way we're going to find that out is by exploring. So I take these guys who are doing the conjugate or a condensed conjugate. What are they doing? And I don't have like a gym setup with like the barbells and this and that. I do a lot of body weight stuff and all the things and different things like that, rings. So how can I adapt that to the way I train? So I'm always kind of playing with those different things, but I like it because it's a method. It has a lot of, you can adjust it. You don't have to do it the way they say it because it's built on principles. It's not built on exact number of sets and reps. It's built on, and you use a lot of auto regulation. How are you feeling that day? What are you going to do? So very similar with the constraint-led approach, which is what? Principles, four main principles, and then you play with the way you want to design your own practice. So that's what I'm kind of messing with now.
Well, that's pretty cool to listen to. And I was thinking about the jump, was it the balance uphill? That doesn't sound fun, but also, I get what you're
Oh, it's
saying.
super fun. No, it's super that I did that yesterday. Yesterday was my sprinting and plyometric day.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, I'm 50 years old and people say don't sprint and do plyometrics. Like, no, do those. Those are the things you need. You have to build up to it. It took me a little while to build up to this stuff. I started doing some plyometric sprints in the first time and I fell my Achilles and all these things. And I'm like, oh man, this doesn't feel great. But took a little rest, do them in twice a week now. I do it. And when I'm doing all out maxing. So when I do sprinting, I sprint uphill because that lessens reduces the risk of injury because you get earlier contact times depending on when you're running on flat ground. And then with the plyometrics, I do it on grass and all that, and do it on cement. But the uphill one, I'm going uphill and I'm just bounding uphill. And I'm like, when I'm done at the top, I'm like, whew, man, that was super fun. That's way more fun than just standing in front of something and coming straight up and down, right? I could do that, but what about now I threw, or I do like trail running. Instead of me, I have my, barefoot shoes on. I run, you got to jump off there's a rock there. You got to hop over that. You're always engaged. So instead of running straight on a treadmill or running on a pavement, repetitive overuse injury, run on dirt, run on grass, run on sand, hop over a branch, this and that. Like I'm just, that's where it's always, and then it makes it so much more fun and engaging for me. So it's a lot of work, but it's super fun. I love training. I always love training.
Well, I think I might have to give that a shot and try it out, especially running uphill. But Rob, I hate to end our episode, but we're out of time. But I do appreciate you coming on the show. Like, this has been a really awesome conversation, really giving some good insight into teaching and like games, especially the ecological method. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you in November, like meeting you face to face or at the Globetrotter camp.
Yeah, man, it'll be fun, man. I'm glad you're coming out.
And I'll do my best to be there. I really want to be there, so I'm gonna do my best because that'd be an absolute blast.
Oh yeah, it'd be a fun time, man. Yeah.
I feel bad. I kind of put him on the spot. So.
he already got all the shame from a farm where he didn't get to come to
I
the
did.
eco camp. He took all the shame. We hit you with the game. We should have hit you with the Game of Thrones meme, the shame.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. As long as I don't get put back in jail, we're good.
Yeah, you and Trigon, John, he was only in New York. He can come over too. He didn't come either. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? You're not coming out here? So
No.
yeah, you're going to go back in the jail. These are our inside jokes for people that are on the Discord, which is up around 2,700 people now,
Hmm.
or members that have joined. Not that many, not as obviously not that many posts. It's usually a lot of lurking, but it's good stuff if you want to
Nice.
check it out. Yeah, check out the ecological dynamics for submission grappling Discord
Will do.
if you
And
haven't.
I have a little bit. I got to double check. I did clean up my Discord. It might shameful. I might be in jail for that, I guess. Because usually I'll just have like a million servers I'm in. I'm like, I need to get rid of some of these. Like I feel bad. It's like I don't really participate in this one. I'm just taking up space and I'll just step out.
Yeah.
Come to the dark side, Rob.
Mm.
You guys are everybody just keeps trying to convince me, but I'll still hold out just to be that guy who is going against the crowd. That's won't be the weird guy, but
Yeah.
no. So Rob, once again, thanks for coming on the show. We really do appreciate it. And ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of the Big Jiu Jitsu Show. I'm Rob,
I'm Randy.
and we'll catch you guys next time.